大家晚上好，我是今天的主持人朱孔阳，很荣幸能够受到麦老师的邀请，参加这次普维动保和 Poultry Times 组织的直播活动。今天我们的直播间的嘉宾有普维动保特邀的演讲嘉宾Wentworks 的梅哈尔博士，Dr. Hilde, please say hi to the audience.
Hello, good morning. Nice to see you
all. 其他的嘉宾还有普维动保的总经理曹宏伟先生，曹总来跟直播间的观众打个招呼。
大家晚上好，很高兴有这个机会我们和 Dr. Hilde 再次合作给大家这个分享一下欧洲蛋鸡养殖方面的先进的技术和理念，也感谢此次 Poultry Time 麦老师周老师这个团队的这个大力的合作支持。
下一位嘉宾是普维动保的技术和执行总监 Dr. Teresa. Dr. Teresa, please say hi to the audience.
Hello, how are you? It's a pleasure to be here today.
另外参加的还有普维动保市场部的经理泰文书女士Alvin 来跟直播间的观众打个招呼。
大家好，很高兴见到大家。
那么首先呢，我们会有请曹总还有这个 Teresa 来给我们介绍一下本次活动的主办单位普维动保，有请曹总和 Teresa。
谢谢。Okay, Chief, maybe you say something, I translate and then I say something more.
Yes. So our company, Plus Vet Animal Health, is a joint venture between a Chinese company and a European company. Our target is to bring the know-how about the application of the plant extracts into the animal health, and in this way reduce the use of antibiotic and improve productivity. Yes. In this seminar, we want to bring the expertise of Dr. Hilde to improve the productivity of the layers and the egg quality during the summer. Heat stress is natural products to fight with heat stress is one of the main applications of our products based on essential oils. So we wish to complement her expertise on the field that is very wide with our natural products.
特总呢也提到说，我们呢青岛普维是一个中欧合资企业，那么我们公司的目标呢就是说利用植物提取物产品同时呢借助于欧洲的这些先进的养殖方面的技术和理念，帮助我们国内的养殖业呢减少抗生素的使用改善畜产品的健康。那么随着这个夏季的来临呢，这个热应激是这个蛋鸡行业的一个挑战。那么我们这次呢，请Hilde博士给我们讲解这个蛋鸡产蛋以及管理，特别是针对热应激方面的一些知识。那么呢，我们也希望他这些非常这个宝贵的知识和经验呢，和我们一些对于植物提取物的使用这些呢能够结合起来，确实呢帮助大家应对这个生产当中的一些问题，提高这个生产成绩。
感谢曹总和特总的介绍。那么普维动保呢是一家中欧合资的以植物提取物产品为主的动物保健公司。在减抗和低抗的这个大趋势下，植物素的产品已经走上了前台，为更多的人熟悉和使用。普维动保的业务不但在国内发展壮大，他们优秀的产品也已经出海远销全球各地。为了更好的服务客户，帮助客户解决夏季蛋鸡养殖问题，普维动保特别邀请了今天的主讲嘉宾，来自欧洲非常著名的第三方兽医咨询机构 Wentworks 的梅哈尔博士。大家已经迫不及待的想开始本次直播的分享内容了。那么我们下面有请梅哈尔博士。Dr. Hilde, you may start to share your screen and the floor is all yours.
Thank you.
Hello, good morning. So today I'm going to share my experience on how to maintain productivity and action quality in hot environments. And I thank PlusVet for the opportunity to give this talk to you. So we'll have some introduction about the importance of heat stress all over the world. Then I want to explain the mechanism of heat stress and calcium metabolism, because if we talk about layers and eggshell, that's very important to understand. And then specifically the effects of heat stress on laying birds, because it has to do with egg production and quality, but it also has to do with intestinal health, immune response, and food safety. And then I want to give you some tools and things that can help to support layers in hot climates. So if you look at the map of the world and then at the different climate zones, you can see with me that a lot of poultry production in the world is done in areas with hot climate. So a lot of people dealing with or doing poultry production and have layer hens have to deal with these problems of heat stress. And worldwide, and that is a figure that concerns all animal species, is that heat stress is costing a lot of money. They calculate globally more than $300 billion a year. And if you look at poultry production, I guess it's not going to get better. First of all, there is a climate change, and then we are dealing through selection each time with birds that themselves produce more heat, specifically in the broilers, but also in the layers it has an effect, and that's what we will elucidate further on. Then the other thing is that the way you can deal with heat stress also depends on the climate, of course, but on your housing system. And we know also worldwide that there's a big difference between the different housing systems that we have. And some have mechanical ventilation, others are very automated. Sometimes the houses are open, sometimes they are closed. So all this is to be taken into account to have good climate control. And when we talk about heat stress, it should be very clear that we're not only talking temperature. We are talking temperature humidity index, because that is going to determine the comfort zone for your chicken. It's when you have high temperature and also high humidity, it becomes more difficult, and the comfort zone for your birds is going to be more close to heat stress. So in general, we can say that the thermal neutral zone for adult chicken is between 18 and 25 degrees. Keep that in mind, because you will see when should I start doing things about heat stress. And that's, well, as soon as you come above that 25, and then depending on what is happening on the humidity side, of course. And as a rule of state, I would say that the sum of your temperature and relative humidity gives you, for the comfort zone, 90 plus the age of chicken. That's mainly when we talk about the broiler birds, but the same goes more or less for the layer birds. And then when are we coming in the danger zone? Because that is what we want to determine. And we know when it becomes difficult for the birds, but when is really the danger zone? When your temperature is high and also high humidity, then you will have the biggest problem. And also the danger zone, if you look throughout the 24 hours of the day for the birds, is not really when the temperature is at its highest, but later on. So that the period when we will see most mortality, for example, from heat stress. If the hottest period of the day is noon, it will not be just at noon, it will be later on in the afternoon. And that is also what you need to take into account when you take management measures for heat stress. Here I've given you some information from different publications where you can see that specifically for layers, you have, depending again on the humidity, but that should be between 50 and 70. That's where you can still control, and the temperature between 21 and 28. High humidity gives you, even at lower temperatures than 28 degrees, can give you problems. So let's have a closer look on the mechanism of heat stress in poultry and calcium metabolism, specifically looking at eggshell formation. And because this seems rather complicated, but the thing is, it starts with heat stress. Again, the effect that it's going to have on the chicken depends on the intensity. And so how high is the temperature, how high is relative humidity? Also, how long does it last? Is it like in our country, it's usually just a few days in a year that we really have problems. In some countries, it's the chicken are born with some kind of heat stress or high temperatures, high humidity for the rest of their lives. So that's a different way of coping. So the chicken will try to respond to that. And a lot of things happen. There's a behavioral response, there's a physiological response to cope with this critical condition. There's also an immunological response. And to some point, chicken can cope. But then comes a time when it becomes distressed. You will see impaired functioning and also immunosuppression. And that is really the critical uncomfortable zone that we need to take into account and see when we need to take action. So as a result of the heat stress, we can say you have lots of things happening, chicken cope or do not cope. And then in the end, you will have a disturbed function, not only behavior, not only physiology or metabolism, also immunosuppression. And the result is that both in layers as in broilers, we get reduced performance. So a little bit more in detail, the response to the heat stress by chicken, as we said, there is a behavioral change, and they will feel less inclined to eat. They drink more. They start panting, and this panting will have a consequence on the physiological changes. And if the heat lasts long, they will not move anymore. And you can see some, they will try to get rid of heat by opening their wings also. And then as a response to that, you get physiological changes, a lot of oxidative stress. There's an imbalance in the acid-base metabolism. We get respiratory alkalosis. We get a change in cecal microbial profile, because there's a change also. This heat stress specifically has an effect on the intestinal health, and we will come to that later. But on the response of the neuroendocrine changes, we see that this is really, you get a stress reaction. That means that you get a lot of cortical secretions, adrenocorticotropic hormone goes up, catecholamines also, and you have plasma cortisol that is elevated, also an effect on the hormones that are regulating the reproductive system. Follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone are also affected by heat stress. And the result is the change in production. In a very bad situation, you get mortality, feed intake goes down, so that affects performance. You will get reduced body weight, you will get a decrease also in the quality of the meat because of the heat. And there will be, if you look at layers, there will be less eggs, and it will also affect the quality of the egg. So in general, we can say lots of things happening, but it's a big stress reaction and it has an effect on performance. How can chicken get rid of the heat? Chicken are not mammals, so there's a difference there, and chickens have a lot of feathers. So the main thing, they also can't sweat. So the main way they get rid of heat is by evaporating, by panting, really. It's also by vasodilatation to open the vessel so that they can get rid of the heat, but it's in fact not so effective because you have all these feathers around. Also by conduction, so that means if they can get in touch with cooler places, that is also something that will help. Convection is also important, and radiation. So that means that all that heat that accumulates around the chicken, we have to try to get rid of it. So the consequences, if we look at the physiological changes that happen or the metabolic changes, is that because of this evaporating cooling and the panting, almost the only way they really can get rid of heat is that there's a lot of carbon dioxide that will be evaporated, but that means that you get, by this increase in air exchange, you get a respiratory alkalosis. The amount of hydrogen is going down, and you get respiratory alkalosis. The pH will go up. Then, for the rest of the body, that's the main thing what is happening. In the rest of the body, there are some muscle contractions in the beginning to try to get rid of this heat, and that will, on the contrary, give you metabolic acidosis, but that is not so important as the respiratory alkalosis. And what does that mean for the quality of the eggshell? We get this disruption of the acid-base balance that I just explained, and the result is that you get less diffusible calcium available to form that shell, because you get a shift in the pH through the hyperventilation. The blood pH increases, alkalosis, and the result is that the activity of carbonic anhydrases, which is an enzyme that is critical for the shell formation, goes down. And so you get less usable, available calcium in the blood to form that can go to the shell gland, and that's why you get thin and weak eggshells. So that's about the mechanism of heat stress and calcium metabolism. Let's have a closer look at the effects of heat stress on laying birds, because it will not only affect egg production and quality, also intestinal health, immune response, and food safety. Because the paradox of this heat stress is that when we have heat stress, behavior will reduce feed intake. So that means that you get less ingredients there. On top of that, heat stress is going to make your absorption in the gut different, because you get a leaky gut. Same time, you get some inflammation, and you get activation of the immune system. So that means through all that, you already have reduced feed intake, but you also have, because of activation of your immune system, increased nutrient requirements. Because if you cannot do something about that, the result will be reduced performance. So here I want to show you, I think this is a very important slide for you to see what heat stress does to intestinal integrity and immunomodulation. Because we say heat stress gives you a leaky gut, and at the same time it activates the immune response. Because what heat stress affects the tight junctions, and these tight junctions are important to filter what is going through the top side of the epithelial cells. That's the lumen of your gut, where the nutrients come in and they can be absorbed with heat, and that goes through the cells. And the tight junctions are there to keep out the things that you don't want. In case of heat stress, those tight junctions are like open. The door is open to more pathogens, and also you get pro-inflammatory cytokines that are activated by these pathogens and further result in more inflammation. And inflammation, we know, costs energy, protein, and the result will be less performance, more pathogens that can pass this normal. And normally we have the intestinal barrier that is sufficient to keep out pathogens. In this case, this is disrupted. You get more infections, like layers. We definitely can see more polybacillosis, for example, and also more risk for pathogens to pass the lumen, like, for example, salmonella. So that means heat stress is also going to increase your risk for food safety. Another very important thing that heat stress causes is that it damages and it causes oxidative stress to cells all over the body, and it starts in the gut. So we have dysfunction of the intestine, and through that, in fact, that has an effect on the rest of the organs, and this oxidative stress manifests in different organs. For example, the reproductive organs, and that is why that influences also the performance in layers, which is calculated in the amount of eggs, the weight of eggs, and the quality of the eggs. So, egg quality is affected by heat stress. Not only the shell strength, we already explained that, and thickness. It's definitely also going to be worse in older birds because their eggs become bigger, but the shell already becomes less, even if there's no heat stress. So in older birds, it will even be worse. So the effect on eggshell strength and thickness of the eggshell, egg weight. So in total, your egg mass by heat stress is going to be reduced. There's also an effect on the thickness of the albumin and the amount of albumin and on the yolk percentage. The other thing, we'll go back to our former slide here, effects on intestinal health. Gut barrier is disrupted, and it also has an effect on the intestinal microbiome. If there are different, and there's a different interaction between the bacteria in the lumen, so that disrupts your normal balance between the different strains of bacteria there, and that has an effect on microbiome, the community of bacteria that are there, which we like to be commensal, beneficial. In case of heat stress, that can deteriorate and become more attractive and more a situation where you have Enterobacteriaceae, Salmonella, E. coli, and it also has an effect on mineral metabolism, because less feed intake, that's one thing, but the whole disruption of the acid-base balance also makes that your calcium is even less available. So that is on top of that. So let's have a look. We already showed you or told you what are the signs and behavior of the birds, but you can also have an effect, you will also have an effect on the eggs that you can see. So I think for the farmers or people working in the packing station, it's important also to look at the egg signals. So what we see here, because we do lots of tests to monitor the quality, so we will look at the albumin content and the quality of the albumin. Also the yolk will change, and then the most obvious thing is probably the external signs that we can see in these eggs, which are mottled eggs or cracked eggs. Heat stress will have an effect on an eggshell. So that is one way that you will see signs in the first stage of heat stress already. And it's important to, because I want to explain to you how we get these mottled eggs or differences in shell formation. And also it will be important later on to see what you can do about it. So what I show here in this slide is the formation of the egg, which after ovulation, your yolk is dropped into the oviduct, and then passes through the magnum where your white is made, then it goes to the isthmus where the shell membranes are made before it gets to the uterus. So that's the last phase, is where your shell is made. And that takes about 3-4 hours to complete that. And it starts with, if you see in the initial phase for the shell formation, you have on the shell membranes, you have these mammillary knots, we call them. And on top of that, we get the formation with first amorphous calcium and then calcite crystals that will gradually, in time, form the egg, where the last part of your egg shell to complete is formed in the last hour before egg deposition is your cuticula. And what you see and the way the calcite crystals are deposited on these mammillary knots will make changes in the way your eggshell is constructed. And that's important to know, because you see these mottled eggs, it can be in different degrees, there's sporing for that. So what you see is these spots, and particularly if you look with a lamp on it, or if you candle them, you can see that you have these spots on these eggs. And if you look carefully here, it's the same thing that I showed you in the former slides, but you can see here, these palisade layers are supposed to be straight. And the pores that you see are supposed to be straight down. If you get stress or disease, the way the calcium carbonate columns and the protein matrix is going to be formed and structured is going to be different. Stress, particularly heat stress, also other diseases can affect this protein synthesis and the way the palisade columns are organized. And if, because of stress, because of disease, they are not well organized, you get in the pores that you can see moisture accumulation between these columns, and in the end, the eggshell and the membranes will separate. And that is what the discoloration that you see on these mottled eggs, in fact, results from separation between eggshell and egg membranes. So that's the effect of heat stress on laying birds. And now the most important thing, because you want to get some information how you can support layers in hot climate to avoid these losses in performance and losses in eggshell quality. So what can be done? I recommend this article to you. It gives a nice overview what can be done to mitigate heat stress. But in big lines, there are heat-resistant breeds that you can use, more breeds that are more resistant to heat. There's, of course, a big part management and housing that is important, but I want to focus on nutrition, what you can do there. Because, as I said, you have some, we see that in high climates, you have reduction in performance, and there are some breeds, like the one on the picture here, with the naked neck gene. Some breeds that you can have crossbreeds where you interbreed with these breeds with those genes. You see that they have less feathers, which means that in fact they can cope better with the heat. Another type of gene is coping breeds that have this dwarf gene, which makes that the body size is reduced. They have a little bit less eggs in number and in size, but they are less prone to have bad effects from heat stress, so they cope better. So they will have, compared to normal breeds, even if you have heat stress, they still get an acceptable number of eggs. The weight doesn't suffer too much, so that implies that you also have less, that you will have a constant egg mass, and their body weight, they are usually smaller birds, and that's why layers in tropical countries make sure you select the right breed. That's on the breeding side. Leave that to the bigger Aviagens and Hendrix companies. What you can do, and what is very important, I think, and to anticipate for periods that you will have heat stress, is that you find out what is the best thing for you in your climate conditions, because in some places relative humidity is low, so then you will have, it will help a lot if you have cooling, if you have sprinklers, but if you have high relative humidity, this will not cool down, it doesn't really work. There, the only thing to do is what you see in the picture here, is make sure that the birds can cool down by convection, so that you remove the hot air from there. And so what you need then is air speed, big ventilators, big inlets that can really take the air over the birds and circulate it so that they can get rid of their heat naturally. So that's management, breeding, but I think what is important definitely is what you can do to anticipate and to help and manage heat stress, is that you are aware of some nutritional strategies that can be applied. So some of this is about energy, protein, also electrolytes, and then, as we said, feed intake is less or should be encouraged. All the smaller elements, vitamins, microelements, are also very important, because you need for all the physiological processes to be able to go on, and you need these vitamins, you need these microelements, so that's important. And in general, if you can optimize digestibility and reduce oxidative stress, that will also be a big help to cope with heat stress. And there's lots of additives that can help you with that. And a very important factor, I think, is water, because they will reduce feed intake, they will still drink. So to have your water supply and quality in order is very important. And then there's a few feeding strategies that can help you, and the structure of the feed, the way you manage the timing of the feeding can also help to cope with heat stress. So if we look at formulation, it's important that when you have heat stress, you need more energy, but it has to be provided in an efficient way. Usually you will condense the feeds, and instead of what we very often do, we rely on the source for energy is carbohydrates. But in heat stress conditions, the digestion of fat and oil is much more efficient. It gives you less, it produces less heat. So definitely go from carbohydrate sources of energy to fat and oil, much better. So the advice is when you get above 27 degrees, that you will increase the energy level by 5%, but higher density, and you replace the carbohydrates by fat and oil. Also for the protein, because protein metabolism is producing a lot of heat, and also not only to produce the protein, but also the end product, the waste product is nitrogen, so also that you have to get rid of. So our advice is to reduce the raw or the crude protein content by 1 to 1.5%. Again, when you are above this 27 degrees, and also not only the level of the total protein, but make it more digestible available. So use digestible amino acids instead of protein. Go more precise to amino acids. And there are a few that we know that are important, arginine, and specifically getting the right balance between arginine and lysine, threonine, and the ratio between threonine and lysine, because they are both important for the recovery. We said there's a big heat stress has a big impact on the intestines and the damage. So the sooner you can help to recover that, the better. So to recover, lower protein levels, but with a balanced amino acid composition. And then, of course, we talk heat stress, so that means that your electrolyte balance has to be in order and has to be more, we will need more dietary electrolytes than in non-heat stress conditions. So you will increase the amount of salts, mainly by putting sodium bicarbonate, but also depending on your situation, you have to look at your formulation, how it is ready. It can increase this dietary electrolyte balance up to 25 micro equivalent per kilogram. It can be done in drinking water or in feed, but of course you need to know in your situation, and there are places where already the water contains quite some salt. Also the feed formulation, you have to check what is going on, and then as needed you add potassium chloride, sodium chloride, or sodium bicarbonate. So all this implies that you need always to have enough and cool water always available. That's very important. Then let's look at a few other elements that really help. Vitamin C, because vitamin C has antioxidative effects. It helps to get that the redox balance back in place. And it also helps, vitamin C helps the antioxidant activity of vitamin E. So they go together, and there's also some, we know with heat stress, you have an effect on the immune system. So vitamin C, vitamin E will help you to improve the immune response, so the cell-mediated and the humoral response both. So vitamin C can also be put in feed, but also in water. You have the amounts here to help you, but it's also important, these measures, like putting some vitamin C in the water, is something that you can do ad hoc when you listen to the broadcast, weather broadcast, and they say it's going to be hot, then do it before the heat strikes. So that's important, that these things are in, these elements are in place before the damage gets done. Vitamin E and vitamin A, both antioxidant and immunomodulatory, and also vitamin D. We know that we need vitamin D, and specifically the one that is already transformed, is the vitamin hydroxy D3, is a better form to administer than the original one, because we need vitamin D to mobilize calcium for the eggshell formation and to regulate the calcium phosphate metabolism that is compromised when we have heat stress. And then I would not want to neglect these micro minerals. And as I said, they play a role in multiple pathways in metabolism. And so zinc, selenium, manganese, they're all important because they improve nutrient utilization. Some of them have an antioxidant effect. They help in the immune response. And it's also good to look for the right combinations of the vitamins, the calcium, and the micro elements to make sure that you can enhance that metabolism. And then one of the more important things, what I wanted to show you here, keep your water cool. So it's, I see a lot of black water tanks, painted white, so it takes less heat. Put a roof on top of it or something, or try to put it in the shade somewhere. That's very important. Because when we have heat stress, normally already birds drink almost twice as much as they eat. But in cases of heat stress, it can go up to 3-4 times. They drink more than they would eat. So it should always be there, clean, cool, and accessible. So it should always be available. And of course, you have to control your quality of the water regularly. And because your water is usually the vehicle to put all the products that can help to cope with heat stress, and the additives, the minerals, the vitamins, they will be added in the water. Birds will maybe not eat anymore, so what you put in the feed is not going to reach them, but they will still drink. So very important that you keep water quality tip top. Then I insist on this holistic approach to intestinal health, because it is not only the feed that we put, it is important for immune response and for performance, that all this is in right balance. And if you have heat stress, you might have to do extra things to keep. More and more we learn that general health and intestinal health, in that, to keep that in balance, the microbiota have a very important role. So it's very good to realize that, and also to use this magic triangle when you deal with heat stress. And we have lots of, we go away more and more from using antibiotics because of antimicrobial resistance. but we have a lot of alternatives that have been developed, and they not only have a replacement for this when we deal with disease, but also to keep the balance of the microbiota in the intestinal tract. So we have organic acids, probiotics, prebiotics, and a lot of plant-derived products that more and more we learn about, and although they've been used for ages, but that can have beneficial effects. Because if you look at these products that come from nature, they, in the plant itself, they are there to defend the plant against fungus, against some bacteria. And there's also different phenolic compounds they're inside the plants. They've been used for many years, and nowadays sometimes we think it's mainly their taste, but it is also because they have antipathogen activity against bacteria, fungus, and also they improve digestion. They increase the endogenous secretion of some enzymes. So that is also why we use them. If you look at the mode of action, a lot of it improves intestinal health because they have antioxidant properties, and they have an effect on tight junctions, and as I said, different pathogens. But they also have an effect on immunomodulation and can reduce the oxidative stress and the inflammation that is caused there. And not to neglect, they stimulate appetite, which, as we said, a natural reaction of the birds is in heat stress to stop eating. If we can find things to stimulate, that is important, because we have more, if we have more feed intake, we will get a better results. And then something that also has been, because there's lots of products that we have been using for some time, and I'm a believer in beta-alanine because it has two functions. It's a native donor, so it converts homocysteine in methionine, and that has a sparing effect on the amino acids that we need. And it is a natural osmolyte, just like sodium and potassium. So it really regulates, it helps to maintain the osmolyte function. So it helps against the destruction of the cells. So it's a good protector in case of heat stress. So we looked at the nutritional strategies. Let's have a closer look at feeding strategies, more to do with structure and feed management in time. So should we use pellets or mash? The pellets can minimize heat stress, specifically in broilers, also in layers, because eating pellets takes less energy than eating mash. That's one thing. And you will have no feed selection. Any additive you put there, you are more sure that it will be eaten. But if your birds are on a mash diet, it's also not a good idea to all of a sudden change to pellets, because that is not going to have the effect that you want. But then still look at the particle size inside. You need the right particle size inside the pellet, but also in your mash. And then other things that can be done in periods of heat stress is to not feed in the hottest period of the day. So early morning, late afternoon. Sometimes it also helps to give a midnight snack for the layers, specifically because that's when they are forming the eggshell. It really can help. And then for the providing at the time needed the calcium, it's a good idea to put limestone grits as a top dressing on the feed in the afternoon. So large particle size calcium that will stay in the gizzard for some time and will be released gradually. So that's a good way of dealing with heat stress regarding feed formulation. So in summary, the nutritional strategies for heat stress, we will use higher density feed, and we have lower feed intake, so we have to give more dense feed, increase the nutrient content and to maintain the same amount of nutrient intake, higher energy levels, more fat and oil instead of carbohydrates, decrease the level of crude protein, but increase the digestibility and the amount of digestible amino acids. Use additives to, in general, have better digestion. So we talk about antioxidants, we talk about vitamins. We need to keep the electrolyte balance in place, and then we have some feed management strategies. So I'm at the end of my talk, and I hope I've given you some useful information, because heat stress has a big impact on egg production and cell quality, and it's not going to get better with climate change. So it's key to minimize the effect of heat stress. The key to minimize this effect is really to anticipate in periods of high temperature, and everybody has to know in his region when action should be taken and to take preventive measures in management and nutrition before you get the rise of the temperature and the humidity and really the effects of heat stress. Try to prevent it before. So with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'll be ready for any questions later. Thank you.
感谢梅哈尔博士的精彩分享。直播间的观众也在他分享的过程当中提出了很多的问题。下面我们开始这个问答的环节。Thank you, Dr. Hilde, for the excellent and informative presentation. Our audience asked some questions during your speech. Now let's start our Q&A session. Here's our first question. 我们的第一个问题，350天日龄的这个蛋鸡有软皮蛋和鸽子蛋大小的这个鸡蛋，这种问题如何解决？ The first question is lay a flock at 350 days of age. The flock have excessive of soft shell eggs and small eggs. How to solve this issue?
Well, at 51 days, and you still have 51 weeks, 350 days, that's about that. You still have good percentage of egg production, but you see they become smaller and the shell is not so good quality. So the first thing to do, I think, is to look to have a good diagnosis. You check if there is any disease, like infectious bronchitis, egg drop syndrome, Newcastle. And then if that is negative, then start looking for the reason why you can have this could be stress, and particularly heat stress. And because heat stress will give you reduced feed intake, and that will also make your eggs smaller. The heat stress makes the birds pant, so they will get into a problem with respiratory alkalosis, and because of that, the uptake of calcium that is needed to give you a strong shell is going to be compromised. So very often heat stress can cause this, what you are seeing there, but first try to eliminate other causes, of course. Does that answer your question?
Okay, thank you. Our second question. 第二个问题，产蛋鸡在产蛋后期如何提高蛋壳质量？So the second question is in the later stage of egg production, how could we improve the egg shell quality?
Well, the thing is that the older the hens get, the bigger the eggs become, but still with the same amount of calcium in there. So what you need to do, what the problem is that the mobilization, because calcium comes from your diet and from the bone, it's mobilized there. But the older the hens get, the more difficult the process gets, and the less calcium you will have available. So that's why you need to provide extra calcium during the time the shell is formed. And we know that the biggest part that needs calcium, the shell formation, is at the later stage of the formation of the egg. So it's important that you give more calcium at the time when it's needed and in the right form, because you can give calcium in fine particles or in bigger particles. So a good idea is to provide extra calcium in the fine form in the morning and in the more coarse form later, because the coarse form, they will stay in the gizzard and they will become available when needed. So a good way to do that is you can do split feeding, which means that you have a different kind of feed in the morning than in the afternoon. Or if that is too complicated, you can top up your feed with lime in the afternoon. But giving calcium alone is not enough, because to mobilize the calcium, to get it into the shell, you need also to give vitamins, vitamin D, vitamin E, and also microelements like zinc, manganese, selenium, because they are needed in different metabolic processes that will help to form the eggshell. So I hope this is a good answer for you.
Thank you, Dr. Hilde. Our next question. 下面第3个问题，蛋鸡和肉鸡的热应激有何不同？What's the difference between the heat stress in layers and the broilers?
Well, excuse me. The same thing happens. Because of heat stress, you get less performance, which means that in the egg-laying birds, you will get less eggs, but it also affects the quality of the egg. So you will get, because of this panting, because of respiratory alkalosis, you get less available calcium, and you will get eggshells that are breakable. They can be mottled, and lower weight of the egg. In the long term, it can also affect the muscle and the nerve, because calcium is also needed for your nerves and your muscles. So it can cause death also in layers. So in layers, you have effect on the eggshell quality and eventually health. In broilers, it's a bit different. It also affects performance, but here it's mainly growth. They will grow slower, or they will put on weight less efficiently, and it can also cause acute mortality, because the broiler bird in itself, you have heat stress from outside, but it also produces a lot of heat. It has a high metabolic heat production from inside. So that is why we sometimes get acute mortality with heat stress. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Hilde. Our fourth question, also about heat stress. 第4个问题，对于抗热应激小苏打的效果如何？除了在水中添加，我可以在饲料中添加吗？Our fourth question is about using baking soda for heat stress control. Besides adding into the water, can I mix baking soda into the feed?
Yes, baking soda is very helpful, and baking soda is sodium bicarbonate. It's very helpful to get the acid-base balance back in a good way. So you, because of the panting, you get alkalosis, and so the baking soda is going to help you to get to a normal pH again. It also helps, it's a kind of salt, to increase the dietary electrolyte balance, which is compromised in heat stress, and you can add up to 2 to 3 kilograms per ton of sodium bicarbonate to complete the dietary electrolyte balance. You can put it in water, but also in feed. And if you use it as a prevention, which is the good practice to do, it's probably better to put it in the feed. In an acute case, when the birds are already not eating, then you have to put it in the water, but it's perfectly possible to put it in the feed as well.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. We have one more question about regarding the heat stress. 下面一个问题还是关于热应激的。那么预防蛋鸡的热应激要从什么时候开始？是在某个温度还是湿度区间就要关注，或者在某个饲养阶段需要特别的关注？When should we prevent heat stress for the laying hens? In what range of temperature and humidities? Do you think we need special attention to a particular production stage?
Well, the stage or the time that you depends, of course, on the temperature and humidity. Heat stress is always a combination of both. So for the laying birds between 8 and 25 degrees temperature and 50 to 70% relative humidity. If you have higher humidity, even at temperature of about 25, you should already start doing something for prevention. But normally we say above 27 degrees, you really can have a problem. And you should remember that heat stress not only affects general health, also the immune system, so it makes birds more vulnerable for other diseases, and of course, egg production at all age. But as we explained, the older the hens get, the more difficult it already is in normal conditions to have this good eggshell quality. So I would say after 55 weeks, it's good practice to already preventively, if you are in a climate zone with risk of high temperature, that you put in place the different things that we explained in a nutritional way, higher levels, high density feed with a higher level of energy, with fat and oils, not with the normal carbohydrates, that you reduce the protein level, that you give more digestible amino acids, that you also use lipotrophic agents to protect your liver. One very important thing, I think, in prevention of heat stress is water quality. We also, in summer, what we like to do is to have iced tea, something water with lemon, with something refreshing, mint, or the same for our birds. It's very important that they always have cool, clean water available, because they will drink a lot more in heat stress. And I think it's helpful to put something refreshing there.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Now we have 2 more questions regarding the bird health. The first question is, in the summertime, there are more cases of watery droppings. How could I solve this problem?
Again, watery droppings can have many reasons. First of all, make a diagnosis, eliminate any disease that can cause that, which could be coccidiosis, could be spirochetes, brachyspira, could be worms, for example. And then again, look at water quality, because in some areas, water already has a lot of salt. So you have to check the quality of the water and the salt content. Sometimes it's useful to add salt, but you have to make sure that there's already no salt in the water. And then your water management means that look that water is available, that your water line is functioning well, pressure everywhere good, that it's clean, so you need to remove biofilm if necessary. And as I said, keep it cool and refreshing for the birds.
Thank you. Now our last question. 今天的这个因为时间关系，我们的最后一个问题，夏季是否会加重脂肪肝的问题？ 如果夏天遇到这样的问题，我是否需要改变饲料配方？Do you think in summer season there will be more fat liver cases? If I encounter this problem, do I need to adjust my feed formula?
Yes, of course. Fatty liver is something that is due to an imbalance in the feed, but in hot seasons, it gets worse. So again, we have to adjust the apport of energy, where usually we rely on carbohydrates. In this case, we are going to put more energy, but we are going to put a different source of energy. And so it should be fat and oil, because the combustion of fat and oil is much more efficient than carbohydrates. In cases of heat stress, that will be very helpful. The same with your protein. You will lower your protein, your crude protein, because that also takes a lot of energy to metabolize. And it also gives you more nitrogen excretion. So what you will try to do is you reduce by 1 to 1.5% the crude protein, but you replace with more digestible and necessary amino acids. Again, you can add additives to make everything more digestible, so that, and also to increase appetite is something that we've learned from our ancestors. We use herbs and in our kitchen, not only to give it good taste, but also to make it more digestible. And we know more and more scientific-based evidence that a lot of these plant extracted oils and products have a lot of beneficial effects that can also be useful for our poultry.
Fantastic, Dr. Hilde. Thank you again for the great presentation and your answers to the audience questions. Mr. Cao and Teresa, you may turn on your cameras. 感谢 Hilde 博士的精彩内容，也感谢普维动保邀请到 Hilde 博士。最后非常感谢大家的参与。So Dr. Hilde, Dr. Teresa, and Ms. Cao, let's say goodbye to our audience.
Thank you very much for having me, and it was a pleasure. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your attention. See you in the next seminar.
Okay, bye.
好的，感谢各位的参与，希望下次有机会和大家再次进行讨论。再见。
最后感谢直播间里的观众的参与。那么我们今天的直播到此结束。祝大家晚安。再见。